At all these levels, the word is the biggest casualty because we do not speak the truth. So you see, guilt is of course transferred, from our ancestors. There is a burden of guilt which is going to be transferred, and fiction is a way to access that guilt. So, my Kulbhushan has a button of forgetting. Probably all the refugees had some button of forgetting, to make them live with what they lost and what they got.
I have a suspicion about your work, and you correct me if I'm mistaken. I don't think your novels are about people. They are about transmission, and people are just the form that transmission takes. So, have I got it right?
Well, that's a very wonderful question. And, I would not agree with you 100%, but surely, you have a point there. Because the people are part of that transmission, and transmission cannot be told without, a real character, a protagonist. And it would not stay with the reader, if there is no such character which really speaks to them at many, many levels, at the level of their heart, their minds, their knowledge of what happened, the history, everything. So I think, that viewed from a broader perspective, of course, it is a transmission, all the novels, like Kalikatha via bypass, the very first one, that spoke of, the migration of the Marwari community from Rajasthan to Calcutta during the British Raj, much before the First World War. And then it goes, but it starts in 97 when India was celebrating its 50 years of independence. And it goes back to trace all the in between generations, and the present, of course. So it is about, what happened, in a century, almost a century, or even more than a century if you think that it starts from 1857 in a way, because there are stories and more stories and then they go back and forth. So, of course, I have an eye on a broad canvas, you can say.
Yeah. To accomplish all this and to put everything together, what lies at the core is a language. You write in Hindi, but your imagination seems to inhabit a multilingual civilization. Does the author choose a language, or does a language choose the author?
Writing in Hindi was, quite a conscious decision, I would say. And there are people who've been always telling me, why don't you write in English? Because they suppose that I can. And I think I read probably more English literature than Hindi literature. But I studied in a Hindi medium school till class 10. And at home, we always spoke in Hindi. And then when I met my mentor, when I was around 25, my gurus, Ashok Seksaria, then I started realizing, that a language determines many of your choices of how you choose to look at the world around you. I'll just give a very small example. In Kalikatha via bypass, you have the protagonist's son riding his new Maruti car, and a fakir crosses the road, he jaywalks along the road, and he nearly gets run over, and he is describing all this, to his family. And he says, you know what happened? The fakir looked at me with burning eyes, that half-clad madman on the road, and he spoke to me in chaste English. Do you think you own this road? And I was staggered, a fakir, adha nanga fakir, speaking to me in English. So you see, when I translated the same thing in English, then it doesn't really put in that much emphasis. So why this being shocked and staggered, by someone like him speaking in English? So that brings out, the colonial hangover we have with English, no? And the the prestige that we associate with somebody who can talk to you in English on the road. So I think that with Ashok ji, I slowly learnt, how a language has roots thousands of years deep. And one, if chooses to write in a language which does not have those kind of roots for you, then you choose to write a different reality. Okay? Once I asked my daughter, she was listening to this, Mora piya मुँह से बोले ना, इसको जरा इंग्लिश में ट्रांसलेट करो तो. So she said, अच्छा अच्छा. She thought for quite a while. She said कि इसका क्या translation होगा. So you see the roots, they go so deep, the roots of the language, your memories, your associations, your recognition of the pain, of separation. I mean, we have this Vira and Radha Krishna and all that, and Mora Piya. So that cannot be really be translated, with the same intensity, same depth, probably the same width also. So this is it.
So that makes me think, what kinds of human experience are thinkable in Hindi, which would be invisible in another language?
Well, difficult thing to say, I mean to gauge, but usually what Meenakshi Mukherjee, somebody like her who's a very well-known critic and a Sahitya Academy winning critic, what she wrote is that, when you write in English, there's a kind of homogenization, a kind of glossing over the details of reality. So I think that is the difference. And actually, when people wanted to know India, at the beginning of the new millennium, I would say, like Kalikatha was taken up for translation from Hindi to German, Hindi to Italian, Hindi to French. And you have all these Hindi teaching universities the world over. So probably people wanted to know the real India, where reality is not homogenized, not glossed over, to make it, a readable text for for a person in West who is not really conversant with the fine cultural nuances. So I think that is something, which the indigenous language literature, the native languages, the regional languages of India, including Hindi, can probably, bring out.
I'd like to ask you about the connection between history and fiction. So, memory, is history just simply memory after power has edited it? And is fiction, after all, just history's moral conscience?
Okay. Salman Rushdie once said that we are handcuffed to history. And I think the history that I write in my books, it is not just some kind of history that happened in long time back, which you can only read, the Battle of Plassey maybe, or, First World War and Second World War. I mean, that you're taught in the history books. But it is a lived history, because you see, memory has many layers. If you talk to your grandmother, she has memories of her own grandmother. So this is how I accessed history, through lived reality of people, or through the memories of those people. So if I went back to 1857, so there's this story in Kalikatha which says, that one of the ancestors of Kishore Babu, he had hidden during the Sepoy revolt, that some Angrez, inside his tehkhana. And he had signed a letter to him that whenever you choose to come to Calcutta, come and meet me. So, and this story I did not get in, any of the books that I read. It was told to me by a nearly 100-year-old man. So he knew this story from his ancestors. So, history is memory definitely, and fiction is a way, to access that memory. But this is, not history of the Rajas and the Maharajas, no? This is the history of very common people, which I'm talking about. You see, my mother told me that her elder sister was about to deliver a baby, and with the great Calcutta killing of 1946, they could not reach the hospital. So she was put in a rickshaw, and they went through small lanes and they faced barricades, because barricades were put up in Calcutta, dividing Calcutta into Bharat and India and Pakistan. These are stories, which really tell you about what had happened and people who had faced them.
You're talking about inheritance here, how stories are passed, from one
Across
generation.
generations.
Yes, but when we talk about inheritance, we relate it with property or bloodline. But aren't we, looking at it more profoundly, heirs to unsettled moral debts? And if those debts can be passed from one generation to the next, can guilt travel with them, even to people who did not commit the original act?
I think morality is, very strongly embedded in with fiction. And it is not a very straight and very overt thing, na? But it runs as an undercurrent. So whatever we choose to write on, and whatever we see, I mean, even our ancestors, the way they behaved, or the things they faced and the crimes probably they committed. So we always have a moral angle to that. And I think inheritance, I mean, in the Marwari community, it was always said, that if there is a dead, then probably, the son or even the grandson or even the great grandson will, tend to it. They will, hum chuka denge, somebody in the family. And in fact, such things were handed over. That if, say, some crime was committed, not a crime actually, like a fault, of labeling somebody as a thief, an accountant. But then later it was discovered that he was not a thief. So it felt on the, the next generations to, meet that person or his children and absolve him of the wrongdoing that we thought that he did. And so, it comes to Kishore Babu. And the doctor, the psychiatrist that comes to see him, and so Kishore Babu in his new avatar, of a mind gone astray after his heart bypass surgery, he's also asking questions to the doctor. And he says that, I want to tell you a story, and he tells this story, and the doctor gets up and tells him that he is the great grandson of that accountant. So, I mean, I wrote this story for my son, It does not appear in Kalikatha. And how this story must have come to my mind, after writing Kalikatha, because he wanted a story, and I said that I can give you a story which will be relevant to any topic that you are given. You just twist the beginning and fit in the story. So it will, take you to the long corridors of history, of things gone by, and the promises that were made and never kept and passed on to generations. So I think inheritance is something, it is a very moral thing. And, well, people try to blur memories, people try to create memories, okay? And they do not want to carry the guilt. So what is happening today, maybe after a few generations, like I know this German doctor, and he says, that, we are so bogged down by our history, because our children and grandchildren ask us, what were you doing when Hitler was killing the Jews? Why were you not trying to save them? So you see, guilt is of course transferred, from our ancestors, from our times, there is a burden of guilt which is going to be transferred, and fiction is a way, to access that guilt, and probably, to get rid of the wrongdoings of our ancestors. We probably take a moral stand, and this is what literature aims to do also, in a way.
And this is so close to me, my own experiences. I'm a partition baby.
Okay.
So I can imagine, because there are certain unsettled moral debts that if you think, you close your eyes and you think about it. And I have grown up on stories from
Yeah,
my
yeah.
grandparents and my uncles,
Oh.
yeah, about partition. So I want to say here that I agree with what you're saying. Yeah, and
Yeah.
you have been talking about throughout. You've been talking about characters in your books, and anybody who reads fiction knows that the characters in them may not be entirely imagined, but since it's fiction, the characters are imagined. They might not exist
Yes,
entirely.
yes, not
What?
entirely, and maybe it's an amalgam of maybe 20 characters for that matter.
Yeah.
So because you bring in something from some other story that you've heard of, probably the main what happens to the protagonist's life is what's attracted you firstly to make him or her the protagonist. But then after that, I mean, the story takes its own wings, and then it cannot remain the story of just one person. It cannot be a kind of a biography of a person, because that doesn't say much about what happened in the larger tracts of history, or larger tracts of those times where the protagonist lived, the several decades that he saw. So I think it has to be a story of one person, which appears as a story of one person, like Kulbhushan, or Kishore Babu in Kalikatha. But then it is not. It can't be.
So you are a fiction writer, and of course, characters may be real in some way, but they are imagined. What have imagined lives taught you? What real lives could not? And is fiction the only form through which we can, which carries realities more profoundly and more confidently than facts ever can reach?
Yes, of course. I mean, you can read any amount of non-fiction on Bengal partition. It is there. But actually, reading fiction really speaks to you, because through the character, through the pain of that character, the struggle, the loss of home, the sense of exile that never goes away. Probably if you are a partition baby, probably you've seen your grandmother, going through that. So actually, fiction really teaches you more than you can ever learn. I mean, to a writer also, because I think the word refugee, the kind of weight that it carries, for a person who's branded as a refugee, and it's kind of a derogatory term, to the person who hears himself as a refugee. But of course, it is a situation, and people will call you a refugee if you are a refugee. But the kind of hurt and kind of humiliation that you feel, and your pain at being called a refugee, and the facts that made you a refugee, I mean, they have to be really be dealt with. And I don't think that till I wrote Kulbhushan, I really felt that pain. But once I started hearing the stories of so many people who have crossed over, and there's one writer, Mihir Sengupta, one of my friends, she translated his book on partition, and I wrote the intro to that book. So we went to meet Mihir Sengupta, So he showed us photographs of a large home surrounded by garden, the kind of zamindars in East Bengal. And probably they had some 30, 40 rooms in that huge building and all that. And where he lived, in a suburban of Calcutta, where you had to, cross the open nali, the drainage system, which is just covered with a stone and left open on both sides. And with a mosquito infested thing on a ground floor, all covered with mosquito nets, so quite dark, and so there's no, I mean, you cannot really, make out that the difference between what he must have felt. I mean, you see the photos and you see the way that his lifestyle now. There are refugee settlements, and I have described them in Kulbhushan, and where I mean, the kind of life that refugees, they were given dole and they had to stand in a line for hours to get that sada hua, chawal and dal, which may cause diarrhea, and sometimes they died because of that. There was no water for taking out water from the tube well. There were riots among the refugees. The women did not get enough saris, to cover their bodies, and if somebody died if a woman was wailing, you knew that she must have lost her child, because nobody cried for the old people who died in the camps. So this is it, I mean, the camp life, I would describe it in great details in Kulbhushan, because Kulbhushan goes to Dandakaranya as a refugee. So you know that what happened in the camp life. But this is the Mihir Sen Gupta thing. I'm just telling you as a real life thing, which I went to meet him in the suburbs, and he showed me the photographs of what had been. And of course, it all comes in his book, surely.
I was born in such a place. So, because when my grandparents moved to India from Pakistan, so these were the places they could find. There was a colonial bungalow they were staying in first, and then they moved to such a place. And but soon, we moved out, and like you are saying that now they have very different lives. They are settled. So the same happened with my family also. So all my uncles and my father, everybody, they did well in their careers and lives.
Okay.
But yeah, we began. I mean, I was born there, and after a year or so, we moved out. So I know those places. But we, for a while, we kept visiting that place. So those open drains that you're talking about.
Yeah. So
it was
still in your memory, huh?
It's etched in my memory. I remember the corners, the turns of the gullies so clearly in my mind. I can make a sketch of that, and nobody can say that you went wrong with that turn.
Wow.
Yeah, because we went there so much when I was a kid, when I was little. We visited,
Yeah, so I think you're the best person to talk about the interplay of memory, na? How it affects you, how it keeps on affecting you. And probably, people who have faced much more than what you did go into a kind of depression if they access those memories, which don't leave them.
Of course.
So, my Kulbhushan has a button of forgetting.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
Probably all the refugees had some button of forgetting.
Yeah.
To make them live with what they lost and what they got.
Yes.
Instead.
I have seen that in my uncles and in fact, my older cousins. I have seen that depression. We try to hide that. Somewhere, I feel that it might be there inside me also. That moral debts that I was talking about. You feel it at times.
Yes, of course. You are affected by, what happened to your parents and grandparents, and the kind of hurt, and sometimes it just hits you, I think it has happened to me also. So sometimes it just hits you and you think, oh my God, my father passed away 20 years back, and I'm still, I have got tears in my eyes thinking of what he must have gone through, when something of the sort happened to him, when he lost his father at a young age or his brother at a young age. So, you have a moral debt and a moral burden also, which you can never let go of.
Yeah. Now I'll move to another dimension. Have you ever, years after your book was published, realized that what you were writing then, your conscious did not fully understand? And is that also the moment when your character stops belonging to you, to the author, and starts living an independent moral life?
Well, I think that my moral compass, has been almost the same throughout. And so it never happened to me as a matter of fact, that I thought that no, I would not have written it in that way now. Of course, at times when I read back, and I don't read back very often, only for readings, probably, at all these seminars that I go to, or probably for reading the translations, if you have to go back and see whether the translation is working or not. So, but even sometimes you discover things, oh, I did write about this. This story, oh, okay, I've forgotten totally about this. But about the moral compass, I think it has been the same. And it's not that, that I think that if I had written it today, I would have written it in a totally different manner. I mean, somehow it has never happened to me. And probably again, it is because of, my mentor Ashok ji, because he had a very strong, uh, moral, strength, dignity, integrity, which anybody who knew him knew of it. And I think because of that, probably, very early when I was just in my early 20s, I took that on, and I could see, on the social level, on the political level, because my writing has a lot of political undercurrent. And Ashok ji was very much a political man. So, not into politics, but somebody who analyzed, politics all the time, and on a cultural level, and all of that. So I think that I had very strong ideas and very clear ideas. If you do not have clarity in your 20s, I think then probably you would not have it later on also. Or if you are okay, you can evolve also into something else, and you can realize that the things you believed in were wrong, but it never happened to me.
So, you're talking about clarity. Does a novel begin with a rhythm, a sentence, or an idea, or does it begin with a question that won't just leave you alone?
Oh, well, and it happens differently for different novels, obviously. So I'll tell you something which I've already talked about many times before, but when I started writing Kalikatha, see, I visited this man who had just undergone a heart bypass surgery, which was quite a new thing in Calcutta at the times. And his wife told me, what a strange thing happened. I said, what happened? I asked him कि आप बीच वाले कमरा में चाय लेंगे क्या? And he said कि बीच वाला कमरा कहाँ है? दो ही तो कमरे हैं. He went back in his memory. So I was quite fascinated. I came home, wrote a caption of this story because I had not written any novel till then. So it was going to be a short story only, probably. So I wrote Beach Wala Kamra Kahan Hai. And this is how Kalikatha started. And after I wrote a few paragraphs, maybe one or two, I realized that I didn't know much about what life was. What were the sounds? Who were the people on the streets? What were they talking about? I don't know much about when there were only 2 rooms. That was in the central Calcutta, the Bada Bazaar locality. I knew that, those people had lived there like all other Marwaris. So this is how, my research began, of finding out those sights and sounds and thoughts that, really affected people, and what they were doing, what they were thinking about, what they were fighting over, what ideological differences they had, what they believed in, what they did not believe in. So it was a search, that began with that, and then it extended to the freedom movement. And of course to the history of the city, because that was also so interesting. Because I realized that the families who shifted from North Calcutta to South Calcutta never wanted to talk about their days in North Calcutta. They just brushed it off as, yeah, we lived somewhere in the north. So like one of the title of the first few chapters, the first, second or third chapter is Somewhere in the North. So, and what you said about multilingualism, I think I'll talk a little on that also, because this Somewhere in the North takes me to that. So like when you are writing a novel on contemporary times, which is obviously an offshoot of the history they have lived through. So then you have, these kind of phrases which you are using in everyday life. Until you use those phrases, actually you cannot tell the story, in all its purport. So this is what happens, that's keeping a title like Via Bypass. The title itself is half Hindi, half English. In fact, for the English translation, we retained the same title. And Somewhere in the North, So these are things that, the multilingual lives that we live and the kind of lives that we live, that is all, that comes into the fray.
Yeah, I'm so fascinated with these little phrases and sentences that start a novel. Beach wala kamra
Kamra
kahan
kahan
hai?
hai?
Yeah. So, uh, have you ever? This was a sentence you accepted and you made an entire novel out of it. But have you ever sacrificed a beautiful sentence just because it became too conscious of its own beauty?
Well, I think I'm not sentimental in my writing at all. Very fact bound and very prosaic also, maybe. And very, very few times you would find something of a poetic element, probably if I'm describing love between two people or of the sort. So beautiful sentences does not mean anything to me, because it's always, like a kind of a fluff, a kind of an ornamentation which is trying to, hide some reality, or, trying to enhance reality. I do not subscribe to the view. And I think, the bare, the unadorned, undressed, you know, that reality I really believe in. And I think that only gets to your heart and not the beautiful sentences.
Let me ask this more profoundly then.
Yes.
What kind of silence is necessary before a genuine sentence arrives?
I seek silence all the time because I'm always surrounded by people. Ever since I came to this world, I'm always surrounded by siblings, and then my husband's siblings and their families, living in a big joint family, and then my own kids. So I've always, craved for silence. And I think, and it had been my habit, to wake up through the night to think and write, because otherwise, there are so many sounds. And I love to, sleep in a room because the birds wake me up with their first call, very sensitive to sleep, in my sleep. So it's always, very difficult to find silence. And I think, without this silence, you cannot create. So I never listen to music, because if I hear somebody singing, just one line, it starts circling in my head, and the whole day I'm singing that line. So I try not to listen to words also, not to sounds, not to words, and not repeat them in my mind. Because I sing, I used to sing a lot. So this is what happens to me then. Then I keep on singing inside, the same line, the whole day I can sing. And that stops me, from my thinking, because somehow the words bind your consciousness. They capitalize on your consciousness, and you want freedom from them. So it's, a kind of a struggle to find that silence which can be created into your own words.
Your novels distrust nostalgia but refuse amnesia. Is remembering an ethical act for you or an emotional one?
I think, more or less it depends on the kind of character that I portray. Because you see, every character has his own way of looking at life. Kishore Babu cannot be Kulbhushan. And the Jai Govind of Janki Das Tejpal mentioned, an America returned computer scientist from the 60s, he cannot be either of them. So I think, all of them have a different approach towards nostalgia and what did you say? Nostalgia?
Yeah, and amnesia.
Amnesia.
You refuse amnesia.
Yes. So, like, I always felt, that when I was growing up in the post independent India in the 70s or 80s rather, like we had voluntarily accepted amnesia. I was not told about the famine of Bengal of 43 or the 46th Great Calcutta killing till I started asking people. So I think we were all in for a, a kind of a social climb, and be, I mean, just buy a house, live happily, shift from North to South Calcutta, those kind of things that Kishore Babu does for his family. And actually, no, I mean, the kind of renaissance that happened to the Marwari community in the 20s, Gandhi landed in 1915. After that, the kind of renaissance happened. The, the, the Marwari women came out of Parda, they were doing picketing and all that. And the kind of regeneration, that happened. So all that was, just brushed under the carpet. Nobody wanted to even think about it. But of course, there were social norms that, okay, if I studied till my graduation, because everybody, the society wanted that for a marriageable, qualification. So, the society had an eye, and the society had decided what was right and what was wrong. I mean, unlike the times that we live now, those days. So I think, that amnesia was something which we had voluntarily, selected. And nostalgia was something foolish to look back on, because again it gave you depression.
Yeah.
So like my father would say, अरे क्या पुरानी बात को लेके गड़े मुर्दे उखाड़ना है. So I think it's only literature, which tells you that nostalgia is important. Amnesia is something which really takes away a lot of things from you. Your sensitivity to the world, the way you see the world. If you want to change the world, that desire, the motive, I mean, you just live on it as if in a stupor, no? Only with the material, things that you can acquire or aspire to acquire, With that kind of a stupor, I mean, you're just living that kind of a life. So I think nostalgia is very important, and it counters amnesia.
Yeah, I find it quite ambiguous. We are living in a very ambiguous age. So, and that makes me think that in times when speed and algorithms are something that we go by, do you think that novels are one of the last spaces where ambiguity is still treated as wisdom rather than weakness?
Yes, because you cannot, a novel should not, I'll say, give you definite answers. It's not a manifesto, firstly. Many novels are written with a kind of a manifesto in their mind. Women's freedom. Okay, we have this Sri Vimarsh in Hindi. And maybe, change the world. But it does not, I mean, it stops working once it has an agenda. It has to grow on you and on the reader, and the reader has to evolve into a person who can understand what it is talking about, what it wants to tell you. It cannot be told to the reader. The reader must find out what it means, what it's trying to tell you. Because we are not, political authorities who will solve the problems. But to raise the right questions, through characters, I think you put it very beautifully, that novels are probably the last space, where all this can happen without somebody directly telling you that this is this and this is that. No, the novel will not tell you. So ambiguity is a necessity, but that ambiguity is not confusion. Ambiguity is only where it is ambiguous, where it doesn't want to dictate you, where it does not want to bog you down by its own ideas. So this is, the shifting, grounds of morality and shifting grounds of, my characters like Kulbhushan, he steals. He steals a pencil from the rich cousin. He steals a shirt from his brother's son, for his own son. But he thinks that he is not a thief. He cannot afford it and his heart came on it. He's also a father. He also wanted the kind of shirt, for his son's birthday. Who is a thief? Thieves are those people who have everything and yet they steal. The newspapers are full of them. The politicians, the business people, they are making big, all these dacoities or, whatever you may call them. So, you cannot brand Kulbhushan a thief and just throw him away. So, I think these are the shifting grounds, on a novel makes you think, makes you not be judgmental, that we cannot be judgmental of the world. When I wrote Kalikatha, a friend of mine who incidentally teaches in a college, she said, why have you chosen a character, which goes around the streets of Calcutta like a madman is getting a psychiatric treatment? Why would you choose such a person? I mean, what does he tell you? So you see, I realized, that people just want, characters, and because teaching in a college, again, you are going through the same text again and again, it makes you unable to appreciate why a person is going through this, because he wants to go back to the ideal days of idealism, which has no place in today's world. That is why the family is taking him to a psychiatrist, because he's talking about idealism of which not even a residue remains. Okay, he himself did it. For 50 years he did it. He taught his family to be like that. But now that he has gone back to those days of idealism, and he wants his son not to bribe, for the factory tender or whatever. So the son says, oh, khatam, finished.
Your characters, your plots, they are so deeply rooted. It just brings me to one thought, one final thought here. If your novels are stripped of their plots, characters, and language,
okay,
what is that one human insight that will remain purely yours?
Again, that's the moral compass, That's the moral compass of not bowing down to what is wrong for gains, for remembering what mattered and what should matter even today. Don't you dream of a society, you're much younger to me, don't you dream of a world, don't you dream of a society which has no corruption, okay, where people, when they speak, their words mean what they say, what they are thinking about, that kathni or karni mein difference. You talk about high ideals, but you're not doing anything to prove, that you really believe in them. So the words lose their potency, na? You're hearing words all the time from all kinds of platforms, but they don't mean anything to you because you know that they're just being spoken for the sake of being spoken, because probably the person likes his voice to be heard by himself and by others because he is in a powerful position. So you see the power structures of our society at all levels, at a familial level, at a social level, at a political level, at an economic level, and the cultural level, of course. So at all these levels, the word is the biggest casualty because we do not speak the truth. We are trying hundreds and thousands of ways to hide the truth. There's a Sanskrit, and aligned with that Sanskrit shloka, Hiranyamayin patrena satyasya apihitam mukham. The face of the truth is, shrouded by the golden vessel. There are so many shrouds, And the biggest casualty is, our moral compass and the words that we use all the time to convey what we are, which we are not.